Just ahead on American Black Journal, Wayne County Executive Warren Evans is here to talk about his first year in office. We'll look at the county's challenges and successes during 2015. Plus, a candid interview with former Detroit Mayor Dave Bing about the city of Detroit, politics, and his term in office. American Black Journal starts right now.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. As 2015 draws to a close, Wayne County Executive Warren Evans is wrapping up his first year in office, and it's been quite a year. At one point, the county's accumulated deficit topped $82 million, and unfunded health care liabilities totaled more than $1 billion. One of the county executive's major priorities was developing a recovery plan to restore the county's financial health. Warren Evans is here today to talk about the current status of the county. Welcome back to American Black Journal.
Thanks, Stephen. Good to be here.
All right, big numbers there. $82 million, more than $1 billion in unfunded liabilities. Give us an idea. I know you've been hard at work this year trying to get your arms around that and figure out a way to reverse those numbers. Give us an idea of where we sit today going into 2016.
Well, I think we probably have done better than I thought we would have at the beginning of the year. I thought we would optimistically be able to get a lot of things done, but I think we've done better. The accumulated deficit, as you mentioned, $82 million gone. The structural deficit, which was more thorny,
right,
that was about $52 million, is down to under $4, and by April, that should go by the wayside.
And by structural deficit, you mean built-in expenses that go beyond revenue, things that are just not money for.
Right. Expenses that exceed revenue by $52 million each year.
Yeah.
And it's been tolerated in the past. And so that's been a big piece. As you mentioned, the unfunded liability for health care, which was $1.3 billion, is now down to about $480 million, which is still a staggering number, but obviously the difference,
big difference,
is worth the discussion. And on the retirement side, changing multipliers and some of the other things is going to give us long-term relief there. But we're not through lifting, because in order to get a 44%, 45% funded pension back up to 70%, we're actually going to have surpluses over the next several years so that we can take the surplus
and plow it back
into retirement. But those are long-term challenges, but I don't want to minimize the cooperation of all of the folks that got us to where we are now.
Sure. Your approach has had to be about cutting expense. There isn't like there's new revenue coming in here and there to be able to do that. How were you able to convince all the different interests and parties involved to say, all right, well, I'll do with less now because things are so bad?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I'd like to take it head on. I mean, I think first of all, we did a good job of determining how deep the hole was and sharing it with all the stakeholders, so that we didn't have a false argument about, well, where
you're hiding money somewhere.
Where you're hiding money.
Yeah.
The other part is all of the stakeholders, the unions, the commission, and others, have come to the reality that there had to be some cuts. I mean, you can always argue about where they are, and it wouldn't be government if everybody was on the same page all the time.
Sure.
But the spirit of cooperation got us there. Now, obviously, some of the powers inherent in our consent agreement gave some leverage, but of the, say, 14 bargaining units, we came to terms with 13. Only had to impose once.
Right.
So I think that says a lot for the folks involved in that. So,
yeah. Historically in this office, there's been some real tension between the executive, the prosecutor, and the sheriff. And we sort of have a weird setup there where you have control over significant portions of their budgets, but they're elected independently. I mean, they don't really answer to you. And previous executives have talked about how the overspending in those areas, or so-called overspending. I mean, I think the sheriff and the prosecutor would say it wasn't overspending, but spending more than what they were budgeted has created real financial problems in the county executive's office. What's the nature of those relationships now? Do you feel like they're really different than they were before?
They really are different, and for full disclosure, I was one of the sheriffs.
You were the sheriff when
that fought about
Bob
that
Ficano
and
was the
argued
executive.
about not having sufficient budget, and I didn't. The prosecutor doesn't have the sufficient budget that she should have now, nor the sheriff. But this is the first time in, I wouldn't say recorded history, but at least as far back as I can go, that there's been a budget cycle that the prosecutor and the sheriff stood with the county executive and said, this is a good budget, I can live with it.
Right.
We're working in it. And at this point, they're both within budget. We didn't.
Did you give them more money?
To some extent, that's the case, but not nearly significant enough for the balanced budget. What we did was work with them meeting after meeting to determine where can we cut and you still provide services. Can we replace a person here to do this? That sort of working with them that certainly included them and included their acquiescence or suggestion as to what we would do. And it's, it's been a challenge, but they're both doing what they were elected to do now, which is try to get their jobs done. And having been a former elected sheriff, I understood people elected me to do the sheriff's job.
Sure.
And you have to give me enough money to do it.
Yeah. Let's also talk about a dispute that's cropped up between you and the Wayne County Commission over some of the things that you feel like need to be done to bring the financial ship back in order. You're asking lots of people to give up some pension benefits, retirement kinds of benefits. You're also asking the commission to do that because you want to share the sacrifice. They're pushing back a little bit.
Well, I think two things. One is we have all agreed that there should be reductions, and there are reductions in place now for thousands of employees.
Of employees, sure.
And beginning this process, we talked about shared sacrifice. And to me, shared sacrifice means we all sacrifice, we all share the burden. And so it would be hypocritical for me to try to do it any other way when we get to
try to exempt
down the line.
elected officials. Sure.
My health care should be the same as everybody else's. And my staff took 5% pay cuts, which have not been restored. We didn't do that with the other bargaining units, and we didn't do that. That hasn't been done with the county commission. So I'm comfortable that we shared, and my suggestion is that everybody ought to think about doing the same thing.
Yeah. Is that a dispute that could hang you up in getting to the numbers that you feel like you need to get to?
Yeah, it can. I mean, we have some mirror employees that we're still waiting for the commission to act on, and of course on the Amon benefits and those other sorts of things. I hope not. I mean, I hope the chatter is just normal chatter.
Yeah.
And if folks are going to resist those changes, then resist them. But understand, I have to ask for them. I'm not going to be hypocritical in this process.
Right.
I can't tell other people what to do, but don't hide behind me as an excuse for not doing what you may need to do.
Yeah. When you took office, there was talk about possible emergency management in the county. The specter of bankruptcy, of course, always hangs over municipal corporations now, with Detroit as sort of an example. It seems like we backed off some of that. You did enter into a consent agreement with the state, which was the first step towards sort of more state involvement. It seems like maybe that was enough to get to where you needed to go.
Yeah, I'm sure that it will be enough. And I hear you. Every time discussion earlier came up about a consent agreement, it was always, but that's a precursor to the emergency manager.
Right, that's coming
and
next.
then when that comes, then there's going to be bankruptcy. And I think now people are beginning to realize that we said all we needed was a consent agreement, and with people working together, we certainly can make that happen. And I don't think we're looking at bankruptcy.
I want to ask you about revenue. Revenue growth obviously is the way, the best way to fix financial problems in government. That's not something that almost any local government can say that they're experiencing right now. I'm wondering, you've worked in a number of different places in local government. Do you feel like there's something wrong with the way we're doing it at the state level? Are there things that you look at in terms of the way the county gets revenue that could be changed in a way that would stop the sense of emergency and panic and cutting that you've had to deal with?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are. I think revenue sharing is not something that anybody
That's
who's
broken.
been around
I mean, it doesn't work the
understands.
same way it does.
You don't know
it
what the
used to.
expectation is. I'm not so sure that urban areas like ours get our fair share back of the tax dollars. You know, there's that issue. But the fundamental issue that I'm trying to look at is how do we sustain the growth that we're feeling now? I mean, I think in the next couple of years, county revenue could likely improve some.
Okay. Based on
based on the
corrections in the
businesses.
real estate market?
Corrections in the real estate market and economic development growth, you know, and that's important. But that's not going to be the answer. The county's financial situation is such that, as we mentioned earlier, we probably have to have a surplus over the next several years just to pay back
catch up.
the pension. But I mean, that will help there.
Right.
But I think we have some revenue enhancers going along to the point that, you know, I'm trying to look at those quality of life issues that will, and school education issues, even though not in my bailiwick,
Yeah.
to sustain it. I mean, the reality is I don't just want businesses to do better in Detroit. I want more people to move to Detroit and Wayne County.
Yeah.
And I want to see businesses flourish, but I also want young people to stay here when they have kids, which means work's got to be done in the school districts
Sure.
and those sorts of things. And I think those are the main things that, at least in my mind, are the sustainability issues that's going to take a lot of deep diving to get to.
Right.
But we've got to do that in order to have a long-term Wayne County prosperity.
Sure. I want to switch subjects really quick to the jail, which is still sitting partially built on that lot on the edge of downtown Detroit. Where are we in deciding whether to go ahead and build on that site or to move to Mound Road, which I know was a possibility? And then what are the financial implications of all that? I know that the bond situation there is somewhat precarious.
Yeah, it is, but getting better. I mean, I think in the next few months there will be a plan for the completion of a jail and the funding to go with it, which is obviously the key ingredient.
Right, you got to pay for it.
and the dollars and cents now, as they have been since I've been there, is to complete the existing site.
To build where the partial jail is now.
Right. I don't have a dog in the fight. I mean, I don't really care. And because it's going to take months to develop this plan, we set it up in such a way that if another plan comes along that's economically feasible, I'm not married to the plan that we're working on now,
Yeah.
but I have just not seen the math that would suggest it's even close in terms of the overall cost. I mean, the taxpayers of Wayne County have sunk $150 million in this
hole.
mess.
Right.
And the first and foremost thing in my mind is, how do we complete it without any more additional burden on the taxpayers other than what we just have to have as a bare minimum?
Right.
It's certainly going to take something.
Right.
But I mean, that's the fundamental issue with me is, do we downsize it some? Do we adjust it differently? And do we do it where it's the least costly?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine when the decision was made to build the jail on that site, downtown, the prospects for downtown, they all looked really different than they do now. I would imagine that if you start talking about completing that jail on the edge of downtown as everyone is just getting off the freeway coming in, there's going to be some pushback, right?
Sure, I think so. I mean, there are two things here. One is, if you go to most major cities, you're going to find
It's gotta be
courts and stuff downtown.
downtown somewhere,
I mean,
right.
yeah, whether they're sitting right at the top of the freeway or
Yeah,
not, but
right.
that's where they are. The biggest problems with moving to another location, wherever, is the inherent transportation cost, which can be
Sure.
astronomical because you're not moving the courts.
Right.
Or if you do move the courts, now you've got hundreds
that
of millions
cost.
of additional dollars to do that. And that's really where much of the gap is, that, you know, people talk about, let's go to this location or this isn't, but the dollars
You're not
don't support
moving
it.
everybody out there, and so you're creating another.
I mean, I think the
another
theory
issue.
is that downtown is growing enough till we move the courts and the lawyers to another location, we'd have enough impetus for backfill. But where's the beef? I mean,
Yeah.
there's still the money to do it.
Right.
Hasn't been identified.
And the plans to sell that site to a developer, whether it's Dan Gilbert or whoever, don't raise enough money in order to move out to, say, Mound Road or someplace else.
Absolutely. I mean, we have debt service on $130 million. The best offer I've had is $20 million.
Right.
So I'm still paying debt service on 110.
$20 million is not
and I got the
130.
$20 million.
Right?
I mean, I just, the math has not worked for us at all in terms of doing anything other than staying in.
Yeah.
I mean, we've looked at renovating the existing jails. I mean,
Right.
that's always a thought.
Right.
But those numbers seem so staggeringly high based on the conditions of them that probably is not the best scenario either.
So you, next 6 months, you think you hope to be able to?
Yeah, next 6 months for sure we will have a design and plan and the financing to do it.
Okay.
And if another plan comes along that's economically better for us, we'll jump on it.
You're
in a
okay to
heartbeat.
do
I mean,
that?
we're okay with that.
Okay. Warren Evans, County Executive of Wayne County. Congratulations getting through this year. It seems like you're in a better position now than where you started, and we'll see how that goes.
I think Wayne County's in a better position, and it's really been a team game, and I've enjoyed every bit of the cooperation to get us there.
All right. Thanks for being here, and Happy New Year. Coming up next, former Detroit Mayor Dave Bing gives his thoughts on the city of Detroit and its future. But first, here's a look at some important moments in Detroit's Black history.
I'm Ken Coleman with a look back at African American life in Detroit. This week in 1947, jazz saxophonist Charlie Parker led a recording session at Universal Sound Studio on 2nd Boulevard. In 1975, John Roxborough, former co-manager of world heavyweight boxer Joe Louis, was laid to rest. And in 1969, Someday We'll Be Together by Diana Ross and the Supremes was the nation's top song. These are significant events this week in Detroit's Black history, taken from the book On This Day, African American Life in Detroit.
Former Detroit Mayor Dave Bing is now the founder of a mentoring program for young black males. Recently, Detroit Public Television interviewed Bing for a national project titled Re-Dream. He talked openly about his term as mayor and about the city of Detroit.
When I came to Detroit, knowing Detroit was a lot like Washington, D.C., it's a huge African-American population here. And it was one of the more racist areas in the country. People probably don't realize that, but Detroit is a very racist city. A lot of good people. There was just, people didn't communicate with each other. People didn't talk to each other. People didn't respect each other. And that hurt our city dramatically. So a lot of our white population over the years that I've been here moved out, but now a lot of our black population, middle class, have moved out also. So what was left when I went into office was a predominantly poor African American population. And so you never had enough people that were paying the taxes to be able to service the people in the city properly. What's happening now in the last few years, a lot of people, middle class, black and white, are moving back in the city because everybody says, the city is on its way back. And the opportunities here are tremendous. When I finished my second career, that as an entrepreneur, at that point, I'm 64 years old. A successful 12 years in the league, 29 years in business, was successful, was financially secure. It was time to really put your feet up, kick back, and enjoy life. But our city was going through a lot of turmoil at that point. We had a mayor that was in a lot of trouble, and wasn't able to lead the city anymore. Everybody had lost confidence in him, and we had to make a change. And I think the business community and the community at large, the relationships that I had formulated over, almost 40 years, 40 plus years in the city, I got a lot of phone calls and people saying, we need you to do this. Why don't you think about it? And I did that for 2 or 3 months because I wasn't really looking to get into another career, especially politics. But I love the city, and the city was good to me, and I felt maybe it was time for me to try to do something to help. And so I decided to run for mayor in 2008, late 8, won, and I went in office in 2009. And it was the toughest time, I believe, in the history of the city because of things that had gone on and things that should have been done over a 30 or 40 year period. Nobody ever dealt with it. And so I came in and had to make a lot of tough, ugly decisions. And, I was an easygoing guy. I was a straightforward guy. I had made a lot of friends here. And making the decisions that had to be made, I knew that people were going to look at me differently. But I didn't shy away from it. I mean, the only way to bring the city back was to do things the right way, to be honest, to be truthful, to be forthright, and use the business expertise and the context that I had. And that's what I set out to do. But I didn't do that by myself. I mean, there were people on the staff, there were city employees who took tremendous cuts in their pay and their health care, and it would have been easy for a lot of those people to quit on the city, to quit on me, but they didn't. And so as tough as things were, we stuck it out. We made hard decisions, and we started to turn the city around. And I had no aspirations to go a second term. And I doubt if I would have, I'm not sure I would have been elected in a second term because of the hard decisions that I had to make. But it was the right thing to do, and our city, I think, is on the right track to recovery. The toughest job that I had was my 4.5 years in the mayor's office, because it really doesn't matter what you do, what decision that you make. 40 to maybe 50% of the people are going to be against your decision. That's just the way politics is. As an athlete, I had God-given talent, and so you use that talent, you work hard, you practice, and you compete. In the business arena, once again, it was difficult, but we grew a business from a startup to a company over a 29-year period, had a tremendous growth every year. So coming into the political arena, where there were all kinds of potholes, all kinds of ugly stuff that had to be corrected. You're dealing with people who, in some cases, were receptive to the status quo, didn't want change, and you had to effect change. And in some cases, you had to fire a lot of people, and that was the toughest thing for me because I knew the negative impact that it was going to have on families and lives. But had I not made some of the decisions on reducing the staff, we would have been bankrupt sooner because I wouldn't have been able to make payroll. We were bloated, we were broke. You name it, any negative adjective that you can put to the city at that point in time was there. And so you had to go into something that you didn't know anything about. I didn't know anything about politics, but I got in there and I said, it's a people business. So if I get to know people, get to know the right people, I can discern who are capable and who's not, who I can trust, who I can't. That was a key. And so going back to my athletic background and my business background, I was able to make those kind of decisions on people. And like I said, we turned things around. We wound up, the city was bankrupt when I went in. It just hadn't filed for bankruptcy. We had an $18 billion deficit. And there was no way we were going to come out of that. So when the emergency manager, and the governor made the decision to bring in an emergency manager, I could have fought that, and it wouldn't have been the right thing for the city. The emergency manager and I got along. I don't agree with all the decisions that he made because he wasn't elected by the people, but the end result is what was most important, and that was trying to fix the city. And we did a lot of things to put the city on the right path. And it's going to take some time to correct some of the wrongs, but at least we're going in the right direction.
The Redream Project launches in February on this station, and it's going to feature the stories of people pursuing their versions of the American dream. That's our program for today. Thanks for watching. You can get more information about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org. And as always, connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. Plus, you can hear our program on 1019 WDET. We'll see you next time.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.